Welcome to the podcast Crash, Burn, Rise Again, where we share stories of burning out and rebuilding better. Join myself, Shireen Lister, your host, and my special guests as we share our personal journeys through burnout, stress, overwhelm, and more, and show how we came out the other side. Learn and leverage from the lessons and wisdom we gained along the way so we can help you to rise too. Welcome to today's first episode of this beautiful new podcast, Crash, Burn, Rise Again. So we probably haven't met yet. I'm Shireen. I'm your host of this beautiful podcast. And I am also the CEO of the business Recast Coaching, which is how some of you may have found this. So thank you so much for tuning in. Welcome. I'm so happy to have you here. It's so exciting to be doing this. And I just want to start off in today's episode by telling you a little bit about where this podcast came from and why it's come to be. It's a little bit of a scary thing for me. I'm still figuring it all out as I go. So I hope you can appreciate that. The same as we do whenever anything is new for us, there's a little bit of a time of where we are consciously incompetent. We're not quite got it all down pat yet. And so there's some stuff that I've planned and I've got organized with some things to make it run smoothly for me as best I can. But in other ways, I'm just seeing how it goes and I'm figuring out stuff as I go along, which is kind of exciting and kind of scary. And that's whatever happens when we grow and we push ourselves outside our comfort zone. Anyway, I'm getting off track before I even start. So today is about, I want to share a little bit about the podcast, its origins, why I'm doing it, what you can hopefully get out of listening to this, and how it's going to work. And then I want to start sharing some of my story with burnout and some of my story of what even started me towards this business many years ago, before I even knew that this is where I was going to go and that I would be doing coaching and training. There was many things building towards it in the background that were leading me to the position that I am today with the experiences and the knowledge that I have today, and to be sharing all that with you guys. So as I said, this episode is why make a podcast about burnout. Yeah. So firstly, a little bit of background about me, because we maybe haven't met yet at all, or you don't know very much about me. So as I said, I run the business Recast Coaching, and I am a qualified inner work life coach, I like to call it. So I help people work with their subconscious mindset to make change in their internal and external world and get clear of limiting blocks. How I do that mostly today is I run workshops and trainings in things like corporate environments and so on to help people to learn more about how their mind works and have some understanding of what might be going on when things aren't working best. So when burnout or too much stress or overwhelm is happening, these are my specialties because I've been there, done that. Then we need that awareness, first of all, that knowledge, so that we can make some better decisions and make some changes. I think educating people and being informed and aware of things is so important. And there's so little often that we know about our mind, particularly our unconscious or our subconscious mind. And that, in fact, is like 96% of our brain. So that's a lot to not know a lot about. And we're not taught very much about it at times. So often as adults, or even some of my clients are teenagers, sometimes we can start to learn more about it so we can have more ownership over what's going on in our external behaviors. We can have more understanding of what's driving them, and we can have greater capacity to change and grow in a way that we want to. Because when we know the difference, then we can make changes. So that's a little bit about what I do in work. So I love to go in and run workshops and teach people about things. And part of why I love teaching people is because I've been doing that for a very long time. So before I became a coach, I was a high school drama teacher. People often say to me, oh my gosh, you're so good at jumping online and talking and doing things like this. How do you not have any problems doing that? And I think it's 13 years as a drama teacher really got me used to talking in front of people and putting myself out there in lots of ways. It's sort of an acting thing and a teaching thing, because you always have to be on the ball. You always have to be out the front talking, sharing and so on when you're a teacher. And whilst I really loved teaching and I loved the process of educating people and imparting knowledge to them and seeing them learn, I, a few years ago, really knew that I was not only burnt out, but really over the teaching environment. And this is not a podcast to make comment about that or anything about that, about the system. I could go on for many hours about that in and of itself. But as if anyone is a teacher, they'll know what I'm talking about. There's just a lot of stuff and systems and things that get in the way of doing the best stuff. And I was over it. I was also over the structure of a school. I mean, you are run by bells. So it's a very structured environment. And so I decided to step out and structure my life my way, which has really helped me to manage burnout and stress and things like that. Am I getting it right all the time? Absolutely not, but I'm doing a decent job of it. A little bit more about me. I'm based in Queensland in Australia. So that's the warm bit up north. And I work from home at the moment in this beautiful office. If you're watching on video, you can see behind me here. It's actually the roof's just, I can reach it here, and the walls aren't far out because I'm actually in a little tree house in my backyard, which sounds kind of strange, but it serves me really well. I'm away from the house and the family, so I can be here in peace and quiet. And I look out the windows, because I do have windows, and I see the trees, and I can see over the fence and say hi to the neighbors and so on when we want to. It's actually kind of cool. So that's where I work. I don't have him today, and I'm probably trying to banish him from most podcasts in case he barks, but usually beside me is who I call my HR manager, my little dog, Yogi, who is an Australian Silky Terrier cross Yorkshire Terrier. And he normally is sitting curled up right beside me here. And I love it because I am an absolute dog lover, and I always have been. So it's a little bit more about me there. So my background is that I am just a sucker for dogs. I'll pat any dog walking around and things like that. I also love to do indoor rock climbing or bouldering. I love jigsaw puzzles, crossword puzzles, things like that. I'm a bit nerdy, like one might say, in that way. And I love to be organized is my other thing. And you might hear as my story of burnout and stress comes, that how that organization thing has been both a blessing and a curse for me. So I love it and I'm really good at it. But if I'm not careful, it can go into too much, into overdrive. It can go into needing to control things, which wasn't always serving me well at times. So it's really interesting how sometimes our strengths and our passions, if we're not managing them well, can flip the other way for us and actually become problematic. So that's a little bit of background about me and my business, and I'll share more bits, of course, as we go through things. But why start this podcast? Well, it's interesting because, as I said, I love to talk on video. So I'm a teacher. I'm good at writing. It's what I've always done. But when I come to write things for my business, like my social media posts, my newsletter, whatever, it feels hard work sometimes to put words down on paper straight away. But what's really interesting is that I can just hop on and chat about something for a long time really comfortably, when I found that a lot of people in the industry have more of a challenge with that, which is totally fine. We all have our different things. Mine's writing, theirs is showing up on video and things like that. And a few people said, you're actually really great at it. I find it really engaging. Have you thought about doing a podcast? And, I've been a guest on lots of people's podcasts and I really enjoy that. But I thought, what would I talk about all the time? And I don't know if I got the time or the energy for that. So I kind of just dismissed that idea. And then it kept coming up more and more. And I was having a conversation with another coach, and she actually said to me, do you think people really understand much about burnout? Do you think maybe sometimes people are feeling burnt out and aren't really sure about what the symptoms are, what to do around it, and what to do about getting out of it? And I was like, oh my gosh, yes, that's a massive area of my business that maybe people aren't so sure about. And maybe you are sure about it, but you're still like, oh, but am I really in that now? What could I do about it? Or getting some different ideas of how people have dealt with burnout. And that prompted me. I went, well, enough people have said about podcasts. And finally, I have something where I feel I can really talk about it. So Crash, Burn, Rise Again was born from that. And the title comes from To me, burnout feels a little bit like a whole lot of crashing as we get stressed. And then the burnout, we hit the bottom. And then importantly, it's about rising again, that we do come out the other side. It feels like maybe sometimes it's not going to happen, but we can and we do. And it's about sharing people's stories with that, because what's going to be really interesting as I have guests on some episodes is you hear my story of burnout and what that experience was like and what those symptoms were like. And then you'll hear other people's versions of that. And as we go through that, you're going to hear and resonate with some might be like your experiences, some might not be. And even if you haven't burnt out in a clinical sense, or even in a I tick all the boxes and know that was me, like me sense, you might be having symptoms of it sometimes. And that's the big reason that I'm doing this podcast, is I want to help people recognize that downward slope to crashing and stop it and turn things around and rise again before they burn. If I can help people avoid burnout and reduce stress and overwhelm in early stages or in any stage, hallelujah, that would be amazing. That's my goal, that's my dream. And I kind of think of it sometimes as like, learn from my mistakes, learn from my long way through the journey so you don't have to repeat them. I got to a point where I got really tired and really sick, physically sick, and really burnt out again and again, and took a long time to learn the lessons. So I would love if I can share my wisdom that's come out of those experiences, so that you don't have to go there. So that's why this has come to be. Anyway, apart from talking about why, on today's episode, I wanted to start a little bit of my story with burnout. And episode 2 is going to continue the story, because I want to keep these episodes a nice manageable length as well. For me, they're going to be manageable in that I'm not going to try and put one out every few days. It's going to be every 2 to 3 weeks that one will be released. And I want them to be manageable chunks. Of course, my episodes with my guests sometimes might go a bit longer, because they will have a whole story to share in a little bit of time when I'm going to share segments at a time. But sort of I'm aiming for 15 to 30 minutes episodes, so you can just digest quickly, especially if you're listening to a podcast about burnout. You're probably really busy, I'm guessing. And hopefully this is something you can do on your way to work or in your lunch break, something like that. Anyway, to share some of my story, I want to start by sharing the background to some habits that I started to form that led me to burning out. Which is the way that normally these sorts of things happen. So often we form beliefs as kids about certain things, and some of them are limiting. So they're beliefs that don't serve us really well. But our unconscious mind, bless its cotton socks, thinks it's doing the best for us all the time. Its aim is to do the best for us. So it thinks acting out these limiting beliefs again and again is actually getting us what we want. But it becomes a habit then. And it's getting us what we want, but not in a really resourceful or useful way for us, i.e. it's meaning that it's putting stress on us. So some of the things that led to this for me were my childhood, schooling in particular. So to be fair, I have had a really beautiful childhood with very loving parents. So saying that we form limiting beliefs and patterns and habits that don't serve us in childhood doesn't mean that we have to have had bad parents or bad experiences as a kid. It's just what our brain does sometimes. So as a child, particularly in primary school, I was really good at school, always really good. I excelled, I worked hard, I did the right thing. So I was always there on time. I always was, doing what the teacher said, listening well, whatever, and got really high marks. Now, partly it was that it came easy to me, particularly in those primary school years. I had to work a little bit more in high school and definitely in university. But schooling was kind of easy. I enjoyed doing work. But the habit and the limiting beliefs that came here were around success. So it was really rewarding to do well. And I'm not saying here that as parents, you shouldn't, reward good achievements. But for me, it was like that was a driver to keep doing good, to keep working hard. And the other thing was I got praise and attention for doing the right thing, which now is another like, what always is the right thing? Now, of course, there is a level of that. of not going and doing naughty things as a kid. But it became to an extent that it created this habit and this pattern in my mind of you always need to strive hard, do good, and do the right thing. And that's how I kind of could keep my head down, get some praise, but just kind of keep on keeping on and doing pretty well, but keeping to myself. Yeah, because I was struggling to figure myself out. And little did I know until the end of high school, really, is that I also had burning in the background, a whole lot of social anxiety. And I think sometimes just doing good and, staying in my lane and being a people pleaser and a teacher pleaser in particular and things was my way of trying to just keep my head down and stay safe and carry on. So this perpetuated further into university. It was always about doing the right thing. I think I went to almost every single lecture in 4 years of university. And I'm not saying you shouldn't, but I'm just giving an example. And it was because I thought that's what I need to do. That's what I should be doing. Yeah, there's a whole lot of shoulds coming in. I had to be early to things. I had to make sure all my assignments were done early, or I'd start to go into a panic. You know how often people talk about they have that panic with a due date when it's like, oh, it's due first thing tomorrow morning, so I'm pulling an all-nighter and I'm panicked now because I haven't done it. I would start to panic like that 3 weeks before an assignment was due because there was only 3 weeks to go. So my panic's a little skewed because it was really this safety thing around it. Yeah, and I had to tick all the boxes. I had to do all the things. I had to show up for everything. So I don't know if you can feel it. I can feel it as I'm talking about it, but I'm starting to feel and see this pattern building where you can see that eventual burnout, if I continue this way, can happen because it's really outward. It's really perpetuating this got to do it all, got to do it right, got to stay on top of things kind of thing of chasing something endlessly and getting it right endlessly. And it seems like it's okay because it's like, well, I'm getting praise, I'm getting decent results, it's all good. And this continued into my teaching. I tried really hard to be across everything, to please everyone at work. And it started to keep a job. I started as a teacher on a contract, and you want to be converted to permanent when you're a teacher somewhere to keep continual work. So I thought I had to work hard to get permanent. I also loved it when people, again, noticed me doing things. Yeah. So I would stay late. I would do everything. I would go, I'll do that thing. I'd know what was going on for everyone so that I could be across it for everyone so I could be noticed and accepted. Yeah. But the problem was sometimes they would just like take that for granted. Oh, Shireen will be that on that. She'll know what's going on. Or, oh, yeah, I don't need to stay late at that thing. Shireen will. Yep, sweet. She always does. That's great. And I was stretching myself more and more, but I wasn't really getting the results that I was after. People weren't increasing their gratitude for me as I stretched myself more. In fact, sometimes they were just giving me even more work. So it wasn't working so well. And the other thing I think that was fueling it at this point is I didn't have much else going on in my life at one stage when this was really building to quite some serious burnout. Work was my only source of fulfillment and connection. So I would get there early to have the chat with the other people in the staff room. I would stay late. Because I had nothing better to do at times. But in the background, I was starting to get drained. I was starting to get stressed. I was starting to resent things, and I was getting ill. And so you can see here how I've come to this building point of how I'm about to crash and burn potentially. And it's interesting, there's actually numerous levels to my burn. There were stages of burning throughout my teaching career and so on that I'm going to talk more about in our next episode now. But I want you to know that there was a few little turning points, and I definitely did come out the other side of all of this. So we're still on the way up in my story, but I started to reduce some things and thought I'd kind of solved it because I got some other interests. So I started to just detach a little bit from being so obsessed with work. I started to date someone and I wanted to hang out with them more. I found myself doing other stuff, things like that. And I thought I had solved it. But I'm going to share with you in episode 2 that unfortunately things got worse before they got better. But they will get better, and I will share that with you. And I will share some tips and some more ideas of how I came out the other side of it. So thank you so much for listening to part 1 of my burnout story at this point, and tune in next time for part 2. And then coming up soon, I have a whole lot of other guests as well. So thank you so much for today, and we'll chat soon. Well, that brings to an end today's episode of Crash, Burn, Rise Again. It's been fantastic to have you with us today, and I hope you can join me next time. I also hope you've really enjoyed and maybe even learnt something today. What I ask next is, if you're loving what you're hearing, please subscribe on whatever channel you normally listen to your podcasts, or on my YouTube channel. And you can also follow along and find all previous podcast episodes on my website, recastcoaching.com.au. If you're enjoying the podcast, the other thing I'd love is if you can share and recommend to any friends, family and colleagues who you think would benefit from a little bit of crash, burn, rise again. Thanks so much, and until next time, bye for now.